Goa. Cleofato and I are today in conversation with, I'm not going to describe him as an activist, as a thinker, as a social scientist. I'm just going to discuss him or describe him in just one word: a giant of compassion. That's it. Ladies and gentlemen, we give you Harsh Mander. Harsh, we admire you for your courage, we admire you for your compassion, we admire you for the forces you so consistently stand up against. What would you say? Do we live in troubled times? Do we live in diabolical times? Or do we live in interesting times?
There's a Chinese proverb which says, may you live in uninteresting times. I think we live in the very antithesis of that. We're living in very critical times, and if you'd asked me this question a month ago, I would have said very despairing times. And I'm a person whose politics is based on an almost naive optimism in the belief in the possibility of human goodness, in the inevitability of justice, and so on. But even I was beginning to find my sense of hope about my country, which I love a great deal, ebbing. And this was over the last few years, the rising hate. All of us in our families, in our WhatsApp groups, in friends you've grown up with, the kind of bigotry that has got normalized is one part of it. But I think most troubling for me was the lynching that we've seen across the country. Once it started, I felt we needed to do a response, and the only response that I could think about to hate of this kind was what I called Karwan-e-Mohabbat, or a caravan of love. And we resolved that we would go to the homes of every person who's been lynched anywhere in the country, to do 4 things briefly: to say that you're not alone, and that there are people who care, that we seek forgiveness for what we've become as a country, to say we'll stand with you in your battle for justice, and to rebuild your life. And lastly, to tell your story, to ensure that this is not lost and forgotten.
Harsh, would you tell us, at the macro political level, we see this language of bigotry, this language of hate, this absolute, virtual civil war, this whole divide. But do you sense that, since you are on the ground, and we are guys who just read newspapers and watch television and get our blood pressures up, but when you go down to the ground,
right,
do you still see that level of bigotry and hate, or do you still see optimism and hope there at the small level?
That is why I was so troubled, because what we saw in these journeys, and we made 33 journeys to 14 states over the last 3 years in this karma. One is the extent of cruelty. We reached a point where families actually of victims who've been lynched say, I wish they just shot him, I wish they just stabbed him. Why do they have to torture him? Gouge out his eyes, smash his genitals, the cruelty, cut his penis. We've seen I can't tell you what we've seen. So the extent of cruelty that has got unleashed, and I think that it is entirely because we have a leadership now which has legitimized our hatred and bigotry, normalized it, but even valorized it. It's heroic to do this kind of stuff. And the victim is actually the villain in this construction. So you also have the videotaping. So almost every lynching is videotaped by the perpetrators. And it reminds me of African American lynchings, which were also performative, where you had large crowds gathering. Now we've replaced it with the video camera. And they celebrate as this man is slowly getting. And thirdly is the role of the police, which treats
institutions. How are the institutions responding to this?
At the ground level, the institutions, it is as though if you have been lynched in the name of the cow, you are the original sinner. Regardless, that's the presumption, and the crowd is sort of naturally got a little done a little more than it should. So they are the victims. The crowd which is lynching you is the victim. You are the original sinner, And that is how they've registered cases against the victims in almost every case. But most frightening of all, to answer your initial question of why my hope was ebbing, all of this I could still deal with. The absence of local compassion. I would ask, I'd reached a point when I was almost begging in every place I've gone, somebody came to save you. Tell me someone came, someone helped you, somebody stopped the crowd, somebody helped you afterwards. And the answer is always no. No one. And that is not an India I thought I would ever see. And that is why I said, a month ago I would have talked about this as a long night of darkness where I can't see when the light is going to come through. And suddenly the last 3 weeks or have seen a bursting through of light. And why I'm saying this is that I feel it is one of the most important moments in the journey of our republic, because I was saying this when Cleo was talking a few days ago on Sunday. I was saying that I cannot recall a moment after Mahatma Gandhi's last fast when thousands, tens of thousands have come out on the streets across the country in support of Hindu-Muslim unity. This is a movement very clearly for solidarity. So you have large numbers of non-Muslims coming out, young people saying, we will not allow you to discriminate against our brothers and sisters. And that is very, very special. It's a movement of solidarity. Last night, as we are recording this, JNU saw the goons going in, and we all know what happened. Within hours of it, students in Bombay gather, and at the gateway of India, and have done an occupation.
So could it be said that fear is getting away with?
So many things have happened, but I think there is a breaking of fear. But I think most of all, it is this expression of that we will not allow our country to become the republic of hate, which we are seeing it is becoming. I really believe, and I've talked to a lot of young people at these protests, that they are actually rebelling firstly against their own parents and the kind of bigotry that they have been raised in. And most of them are rebelling against that idea of India which our political leadership with Mr. Modi and others are taking us towards. And we are very, it is truly like we're picking up the very questions that Gandhiji had raised all those years ago. Think of a time 1 million people had died in Hindu-Muslim riots in 47. Train loads were coming of corpses in both directions. My own family is displaced from what is now in Pakistan, in Rawalpindi. So all of them coming with all their hatred and anger on both sides. And in the middle of this, and a country is formed on the basis of religion, Pakistan, to have the courage to then stand up and say, no, India will be a country to which Muslims will belong as equal citizens. That kind of courage, I call it radical love. I see this Absolutely. As a movement of radical love that we're seeing unfolding. And whatever happens now, I think that we have established, that the India that I saw in all of these lynchings is still not the only India we have.
Do you think, for instance, Harsh, that just more than the youth coming out today following the CAA, is it just more about Hindu-Muslim solidarity, or is it more an expression of fascism versus democracy? Do you think that the youth of today are more interested in enforcing their democratic rights, and this just became one of the kind of pivotal points at which...
Only to add one more aspect to this. See, at the international level also, our standing is going down. Is that also in some way affecting?
No, I think that young people... No, the immediate response was the exclusion of Muslims for the first time on the basis of religion from the rights to citizenship itself. Whether every young person who is on the streets understands the complexities of the kind that, say, Cleo understands of what all of these means, maybe not. But they have had this sense that our government is for the first time creating a law which debars people only on the basis of religious identity. That is the journey to fascism. That is where Germany went, this idea of graded citizenship. So I think it is, and you talked about fear. I think also this breaking out of fear. So, just the kind of posters that I've seen. So on the one hand, you have, the purest expression of solidarity. So I see this poster which says, 2 words that break my heart, : except Muslim. This is one poster that really touched me. That's pure solidarity. There's some which is just humor, having fun. So one particularly I've seen, particularly where Muslims are out, and I've now been addressing rallies of 1 lakh people, and it's just heady to see the kind of solidarity that is coming out. You have people wearing their Muslim identity with skull caps and hijabs, holding the national flag, surrounded by non-Muslims. There's certainly. So one poster there, which I think is particularly funny, which I've seen now all across the country, is about, yes, it's in Hindi. Yes, we did have documents. My father had documents, but then he got a goat, and then the goat ate the documents, and then on Eid we ate the goat, and so now where do I get my documents? But the third are direct confrontations. I know, really challenging Mr. Modi and Mr. Shah by name. Comparing them to Hitler, there's something that has broken. So I think it's all of these 3, and so it is a breaking through, and it's a claiming of let's now get back to being a country which is.
And is it, even if it is for political optics, or even if it is for optics, but are those optics good when you have large sections of the Muslim crowd, for instance, which are opposing this, actually coming out with the constitution, coming out with the flag? Do you think that helps, or do you think does that put this government on the back foot, which always loves to ghettoize the Muslims into this kind of identity thing?
Absolutely. No, I feel it's the most, one of the most beautiful things that they're coming out. So when the Prime Minister taunted them, saying, I can recognize the protesters by their clothes, somehow it again was. This young man from Jabalpur came to one of our protests in Delhi, and he was moved so much. He was of Hindu identity, and he came and he stripped down to his boxer shorts in the very cold winter evening, and he put up a sign saying, "Now, Prime Minister, please recognize me by my clothes." Something was stirring, and Muslims coming out, wearing their identity unapologetically, and holding the national flag. In fact, one of our slogans is "Ek haath mein tiranga, dusre haath mein samvidhan, dil mein mohabbat, nikal chala hai Hindustan." It is that it's a beautiful feeling, and I think that it is important. And I spontaneously said this the first day in Jamia when a number of students had gathered, and it is something now I'm repeating wherever I go to my Muslim audiences, saying from now on, do not let anybody question your love for this country and your loyalty to this country, least of all those who never took part in the freedom struggle, and that the rest of us Indians in 1947 had no other country to choose. So we are Indian by chance. Your parents and grandparents had a choice between Islamic Pakistan and secular India, and they chose India. And therefore you are Indian by choice, and if anyone has really proved their loyalty to this country, it is the Indian Muslim. And so, that kind of feeling is giving them a sense of assurance.
Now, see, as far as this government is concerned, they had won 303 on their own.
Yeah.
Huge majority. There are 3 issues, Ayodhya, 370, triple talaq are done. Now, where was the need for the citizenship law changes?
See, none of these, again, as a lawyer, you see, even 370 was not necessary. It had already got eroded. The idea was to actually humiliate the people of the only Muslim majority state that we have, and put their nose into the ground and sort of rub it. I mean, that is the way that they did it. Even if they had to abrogate 370, they could have had a sense of a constitutional process, gone to the assemblies, had a public discussion. But they wanted to do it in this way. The Ayodhya judgment, of course, it is a Supreme Court judgment, but it is so extraordinarily doesn't follow any constitutional principles, as you can see. And triple talaq, I mean, the idea, of course, abandoning your wife is a terrible thing. But is it a terrible thing only if you're a Muslim? So what about our Prime Minister? You know, I mean, he's lived his life having abandoned his wife. So isn't that a criminal act if this is a criminal act? So, you know, this idea of, and everything else in the hate speech against Muslims, there was a sense that it almost looked like India is already now a Hindu Rashtra in practice. And our political parties were all negotiating sort of very timidly, the courts. Everybody seemed to be negotiating within the framework not of a secular democratic constitution, but a Hindu Rashtra. And that's got cracked. That's suddenly got broken.
Correct. But
do you think that break is, you know, this kind of break is it like just a hope, a kind of a chimera or a mirage, or is it really true? Because at the political level, the BJP still continues to win elections. At the political level, like in Goa, for instance, you've had the whole of Goa virtually voting the BJP out in 2017, getting the Congress guys in, and all the Congress guys just shifting over to the BJP. So politically, I think you have to give credit to the BJP guys for sticking to their core ideology of Hindutva, and all the rest just absolutely
being opportunistic,
and jumping ship. So how does that help, let's say, civil society activists?
If you want to give credit, I really go back 100 years. You know, it's exactly 100 years, and this is something, again, to young people I want to point out. Exactly 100 years ago, Gandhiji had come and taken leadership and said this would be a country which belongs equally to all. Exactly 100 years ago, Hindu Mahasabha was constituted, and in 1925, the RSS, which had a different idea. And they have fought for it in a dedicated way all of this time. They didn't bother about the freedom struggle. This was their battle. And they've remained dedicated to it. And they believe that now their time has come. And Mr. Modi is doing it for power. He's doing it. But it is also an ideological movement. I mean, that's what makes, I think, Mr. Modi far more dangerous than, say, Trump. Trump does not have an RSS. He doesn't have a long ideological battle for transforming his nation. So I have a feeling that, I mean, I see this as a very decisive moment because, you know, what you were talking about, they were ticking off quickly, you know, and almost like in a juggernaut. You know, we've done this. So this was the kingpin. And if you really look back, the original sin for what we are seeing today was laid by Vajpayee's government.
yes,
It was Vajpayee's government which in 2003 did three things which said, you know, you can't be a citizen if your parent is an immigrant, that for identity cards, and that we will make a national register to identify illegal immigrants, and for that there will be a national population register which will pick and choose, which you had explained so well, Cleo. But please remember, this was done by Vajpayee, and everyone sort of says they all have a very clear. If Vajpayee had got elected back in 2004, most likely we would have seen this unfold much earlier. So they have a game plan. They are very dedicated. Our political parties of the opposition are so shameful in their lack of any kind of moral or political commitment that for the most narrow immediate political gains, Jagan Reddy or a Naveen Patnaik, who are certainly not communal, and of course Nitish, all of them lined up with the BJP. And it's really interesting that when young people have come onto the streets, all of them are now changing back. So they are being, instead of leading the country, they are being led by our young people, which is not such a bad thing. But it just shows how empty, you know, when we think of a Gandhiji today, as I said, 1 million people have died and Pakistan is being constituted, to be willing to stand completely alone and say, no, Muslims will have every right to be in this country as equal citizens. To say that at that moment, and look at our political parties today, including the Congress, I think only the left, and this particular moment, we must give credit to the left. They have been clear. In Kerala, they passed the resolution. They brought even their they brought the Congress and its parties together. I mean, it's a very exceptional thing that they've done. So I think the left at this moment has only segment of our political spectrum which has shown ideological clarity and commitment.
What was the need for yesterday's attack? I mean, how does this happen? Why? What do you attribute this to? on the JNU students?
I have a feeling, एक हिंदी में कहते हैं ना बौखला जाना. I think that Mr. Modi and Mr. Amit Shah and Adityanath and this whole spectrum, they are basically, their whole politics is based on this kind of communalize, lie and crush with force. You know, that is the threefold thing in their playlist. They've tried everything. Nothing seems to be working. I think they're completely unnerved by the numbers that have emerged on the streets. Somebody then they say it's the Congress which is doing this. I find that so hilarious. If the Congress could do a fraction of this, they would be in power. You know, so it is. I think they are so unnerved, and we're going to see. I think we're heading towards even. In UP. The police is in a complete rampage. They're going into people's houses, destroying everything. I've seen lynch mobs do it while the police stands by, but not the police itself going and thrashing and breaking everything, saying Jai Shri Ram while they're doing it and telling, many Muslim households I've been in UP are telling me that among the other things that they tell them is, ek to azadi chahiye na, ye hai tumhari azadi. And the second thing they tell them is that, anyway, now you're going to Pakistan. And so this house is going to be ours. Now that, it's in that, I think this decisive, you're seeing visuals of the police. Last night I was watching the police actually leading the goons safely out of the campus. What is happening? I mean, we are being ruled by a criminal leadership.
Just to change track a little bit, Harsh, from trying to find a solution to the troubled times or diabolical times we live in, there is no running away from the fact that religion plays a very major role as far as any political dispensation other than what, statist Stalin and China did. But otherwise, religion is an important factor. Do you think the time has come on the political front? Because we keep talking about the Muslim, victim, the Muslim identity, etc. About a genuine Hinduism coming to the fore as a political force, because Gandhi was a genuine Hindu in many ways, because he articulated and he lived the Hindu principles of life, the Hindu Dharma, as it were. Do you think we lack that in our left liberal groups, in the Congress leadership, where Rahul Gandhi does some tricks and stunts? But do you think we lack a genuine Hindu compassionate leadership to take on this Hindutva movement, which really, to my mind, or whatever my limited reading, has got nothing to do with Hinduism? Do you think that is a solution in many ways to try and get the moderate Muslim, to try and get the moderate Hindu and the liberal together as a political force with a genuine Hindu leader? Is that a kind of a solution against this kind of Hindutva bigotry? Or do you think that we just keep fighting these identity politics as little pockets from...
I would partly agree with you and partly not. Look back at the freedom struggle. There's something that really amazes me when I think about it. Think of the two people who fought most, and one gave his life for the idea of the rights, equal rights of people of every faith. One was Mahatma Gandhi, the other was Maulana Azad. He was a Maulana, deeply devout in their own religions, and they did everything for the rights of people of every other faith. The two people who fought for the religious state, Jinnah Sahib was not a practicing Muslim most of his life, and Savarkar was a self-professed atheist. He said he was an atheist, and they fought for religious state. So it had nothing to do with religion, and I think that the Hindutva guys are so illiterate about Hinduism that
So do we require that literate or the kind of philosophical Hinduism to come to the fore as a political leadership?
I'm anxious about that. So let me try to explain. I feel that in the left we have been intolerant of religious faith, and I think
that's low-lying fruit for these guys.
That's completely wrong, because I feel that looking down on people's faith is also a form of intolerance.
Absolutely.
So I have a feeling that we should say that this idea of equal respect for every faith, including the absence of faith. So I am opposed to whatever your practices and beliefs are, as long as they are within the four walls of the Constitution, and they don't they're not against, they don't foster hate, they don't foster bigotry, and they're not don't promote inequality of gender and other sexual minorities, etc. So I think that that's untouchability and this kind of caste. So I think that is, so my feeling would be that we should go to, Indian secularism is very wonderful and it's very different from, say, European, French, etc. See, in France, secularism would be to deny the right of a young woman to wear a hijab in a classroom. In ours, it is to defend her right to wear it. And so this idea of equal respect, I feel, it doesn't require us, I mean, I feel that we should be comfortable with religion, but it should be in the space of equal respect. And I think that the Abrahamic religions, Christianity and Islam, have to articulate as much as you're saying, but the discovery of compassionate elements of the Hindu faith, the idea of equal respect, and I raise it, which I don't.
Can I bring that, because that's really the nerve point and the sore point. And in Goa, I know I'm going to get bashed for this, but you
let's all take a
stand on this, because we look at the Hindutva movement, which is, to my mind, just trying to mimic, a barbaric medieval form of Christianity and Islam, in my opinion. Now, if you have, the first commandment is, thou shalt have one God and only one God, and the rest of the gods are all rubbish. Or if you have the concept of a kafir as in a Muslim, how does that reconcile with what we are talking about, secular principles and respect for all religions?
That's an issue. So because the Muslim...
Are these issues that the Christian and the Muslim also need to address? The Christian and Muslim leadership also needs to address?
Absolutely, absolutely. And and because Muslim audiences across want to hear me and they listen with a lot of care. So I say this, but I talk about two things which I would like to say. One of them is that this is a movement of solidarity. And I ask my, when large Muslim audiences are there, I've spoken to 1 lakh people in Bangalore and Pune, etc. One of the questions I ask them is, put your hand to your heart and tell me that if this law had excluded Dalits and not Muslims, would you have been here? And can you make a promise to yourself that next time, if it is with Dalits, you will also feel the same way and come out. So I think the obligation of solidarity is something that we all have to learn. The Christians have been particularly, the Christian leadership, especially the religious leadership, is sometimes quite willing to go along with Islamophobic kind of forces, etc. I don't think they've shown solidarity. I'm not talking about the Christian people, but Christian leadership. But the most fundamental question for me is this question of equal respect. And one of my very dear friends is somebody called Dr. Bandukwala. I think your audiences won't know him. He was a physics professor in Baroda in the 2002 riots. And his heart broke and it has never joined again, because in the audience, in the crowds that came and burnt down his house were his own students. And truly his heart has never healed. And one of the things he tells me is that I feel very lonely these days. He says, my Hindu friends tell me that, Dr. Bandukwala, you're so nice, you're almost like a Hindu. And he says, why can't I be completely Muslim and be very nice? So that's one problem. But he says to my Muslim friends, and this is really answering your question, he says that I ask them, this idea that ours is the only way, how is it compatible with the idea of equal respect? And the one question he asked them is, in the Jannat, in heaven, would Gandhiji have entry? And he says that if your answer is that in Jannat Gandhiji would be barred, Dr. Bandukwala said to me, I tell them, I don't want to go to that Jannat. And I think there is something that the Hindus, the Muslims, the Christians, all of us have to introspect and think
fact,
about.
This is the very foundation at which, the very discussion which we are having today was what was discussed when they were framing the constitution. And our principles were exactly based on this.
Of equal respect.
Equal respect. And that is how nowhere religion word appears, particular religion in any of the laws. For the first time, the citizenship law brings this concept of religion. Otherwise, none of our laws have an element of religion.
But that's law. But I'm saying that, I do feel that ultimately this battle is not going to be decided in Parliament, not in the courts, in the streets, but more than the streets, really in our hearts. It is really about us deciding as a country, are we going to allow the hatred that we are being taught by our Prime Minister and our leadership to colonize our hearts, or are we going to fight it? And by our parents very often. Are we going to fight it? So I think that it is really a very profound moment. And this idea of equal respect is something that all of us have to learn and relearn.
So, at the end of the day, Dr. Harsh, do you feel optimistic? Do you feel pessimistic? Or
As I told you, my politics is based on an almost naive optimism. At this moment, I think we've already won. Whatever happens in the movement, for three reasons. One quick reason is that we have established that what looked like even a month ago that there was almost a consensus about a Hindu Rashtra, about changing India, without having to formally rewrite the constitution, 1,000-word legislation was enough to turn around our constitution, actually, the Citizen Amendment Act. And that consensus isn't there, that young people are out. I think that's one. The idea of solidarity, that students get beaten up in Jamia and students all over come out. Students are beaten up in JNU and the Bombay students are out at 2:30 at night. That idea of solidarity has already been established. Thirdly, that our Muslim brothers and sisters are being reassured that they don't stand alone and that we stand together. And lastly, that our spineless, morally spineless opposition parties are beginning to learn the morality of the Constitution.
or that if you fight the good fight, there's a good chance you
Or
can
that you
win.
win again.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks.
Harsh,
A
for
pleasure.
being so illuminating as always.